My name is Rachel Montgomery, and I'm 34 years old. 6 months ago, I walked into a conference room where my ex-husband, Derek Shaw, was pitching to a group of potential investors for his latest business venture. He had no idea I would be there, sitting in the back row with screenshots, emails, and text messages proving that he had been lying to these investors about our relationship status and using photos of my interior design projects to make himself look successful and stable. What Derek didn't know was that one of the investors he was pitching to was my new client who had alerted me to Derek's scheme when he recognized my work in Derek's presentation. The look on Derek's face when I stood up and presented evidence that he had been fraudulently using my business to rehabilitate his reputation was the most satisfying moment of my professional life. If you're watching this story unfold, drop a comment about where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button, because what happened next proved that sometimes the best revenge is letting someone think they're getting away with using you while you quietly build a case to expose them. But to understand how I got to that boardroom exposing my ex-husband's lies to the very investors he was trying to impress, I need to take you back 3 years and show you how a marriage I thought was solid fell apart when money got tight and Derek showed his true colors. I met Derek Shaw 8 years ago at a networking event in San Francisco. I was working as an interior designer for a mid-sized firm, building my career and developing my style. Derek was a charismatic entrepreneur who had started a tech consulting company and was full of ambitious ideas about disrupting industries and building something revolutionary. Derek was charming, confident, and had a vision for his life that was compelling. He talked about the business he was building, the clients he was landing, and the future he was creating. I was attracted to his ambition and his certainty about where he was going. We dated for 2 years before getting married. During that time, Derek's business seemed to be doing well. He had a nice office, a few employees, and was always talking about deals he was closing and contracts he was negotiating. I was impressed by his success and excited to build a life with someone who seemed to have his career figured out. After we got married, I continued working at the design firm while Derek ran his consulting business. We bought a house together in Oakland, a beautiful craftsman that needed some renovation work. I loved that house and spent months updating it, using it as a showcase for my design work. Everything seemed fine for the first few years of our marriage. Derek's business appeared successful. We had a comfortable lifestyle, and we were both building our careers. But I started noticing some concerning patterns about 3 years into our marriage. Derek would make big financial commitments without discussing them with me. He would spend large amounts of money on business expenses that seemed questionable, like expensive dinners and luxury hotel stays that he claimed were necessary for client relationships. When I would ask about the business finances or express concern about spending, Derek would become defensive. "I'm the one running a business," he would say. "You work a regular job. You don't understand what it takes to build something or maintain client relationships. These expenses are investments in the business." I accepted this explanation because I wanted to trust Derek and because I didn't have detailed knowledge about his business operations. But I felt uncomfortable with how much money he was spending and how secretive he was about the actual state of his finances. Then, about 2.5 years ago, everything fell apart. Derek's business, which I had thought was thriving, suddenly collapsed. It turned out that he had been losing money for over a year, had accumulated significant business debt, and had been using our personal savings to keep the business afloat without telling me. "The business is failing," Derek finally admitted during a tense conversation in our kitchen. "I've lost several major clients, I'm behind on payroll, and I've been using our savings to cover business expenses." I felt like the ground had dropped out from under me. "How much of our savings?" "Most of it," Derek admitted. "About $75,000. I stared at him in shock. We had saved that money together over years, and Derek had spent it on his failing business without consulting me or even telling me what was happening. "How could you do this without talking to me?" I demanded. "That was our money, our future, our security. You had no right to spend it without my knowledge or consent." "I thought I could turn things around," Derek said. I thought if I could just keep the business running a little longer, I could land new clients and recover. I didn't want to worry you or admit that I was struggling. So instead, you stole our savings and lied to me about the state of your business? I didn't steal anything, Derek protested. We're married. That money belonged to both of us, and I used it for our family's business. But it wasn't our family's business. It was Derek's business that I had never been involved in, and that he had kept me completely in the dark about while it failed and while he depleted our savings trying to save it. Over the following months, Derek's business completely collapsed. He closed his office, let go of his employees, and shuttered the company. We were left with debt from his business loans, depleted savings, and a very strained marriage. I tried to be supportive during this difficult time. I understood that businesses sometimes fail, and I didn't want to abandon Derek when he was going through a crisis. But I was also angry about how he had handled everything, keeping me in the dark and using our shared resources without my knowledge or consent. What made it worse was that Derek became increasingly bitter and difficult to live with after his business failed. Instead of taking responsibility or trying to figure out next steps, he became resentful and blamed everyone else for his failure. His clients hadn't been loyal. His partners had let him down. The market had shifted unfairly against him. He never acknowledged that maybe his business model hadn't been viable, or that his financial management had been poor, or that his expensive lifestyle had contributed to the company's collapse. Derek spent months after the business closure doing very little. He would apply for jobs half-heartedly, interview occasionally, and generally act like a victim of circumstances beyond his control. Meanwhile, I was working long hours at my design job to cover our expenses and slowly rebuild our savings. About a year and a half ago, Derek announced that he wanted a divorce. The reason, according to him, was that we had grown apart and that our marriage wasn't what he wanted anymore. I was devastated, but also, on some level, not surprised. Derek had become increasingly distant and resentful, and I had felt like I was carrying the entire burden of our relationship, financially and emotionally. I think we'd both be happier moving forward separately, Derek said during the conversation where he asked for the divorce. We can do this amicably, split everything fairly, and move on with our lives. The divorce process was anything but amicable. Derek tried to claim that he was entitled to half of everything, despite the fact that he had depleted our savings for his business and had contributed almost nothing financially in the year after his business failed. He argued that since we were married, he deserved equal division of assets regardless of his financial mismanagement. I hired a divorce attorney named Patricia Wang, who advised me that California's community property laws meant that assets and debts acquired during marriage were generally split equally. But she also argued that Derek had engaged in financial misconduct by using marital funds for his business without my knowledge, which should be factored into the property division. The divorce dragged on for over a year, with Derek fighting over everything, despite having contributed almost nothing during the final year of our marriage. Finally, the divorce was finalized about 8 months ago. I kept the house, which I had to buy out Derek's interest in. Derek got some of our remaining savings and walked away from our marriage, having depleted our finances, wasted a year of my emotional energy during the divorce, and taken no responsibility for any of it. After the divorce finalized, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Relief that it was over, anger at how Derek had handled everything, and determination to rebuild my life and my finances. I had been thinking for years about starting my own interior design business, rather than working for someone else. The divorce and the financial difficulties Derek had created had actually clarified what I wanted. I wanted to build something that was completely mine, that reflected my vision and my values, and that no one could mismanage or take away from me. I used what was left of my savings after the divorce settlement to start Montgomery Design, my own interior design business. I specialized in sustainable, livable luxury, creating beautiful spaces that were also functional and environmentally conscious. I started small, taking on residential projects from referrals and building a portfolio. But what really changed things was when I started documenting my projects on Instagram and other social media. I would post before and after photos, share my design philosophy, and give followers a behind-the-scenes look at my creative process. The response was overwhelming. Within a few months, my Instagram account had grown to over 50,000 followers. Potential clients were reaching out from all over the Bay Area. Design publications were featuring my work, and I was booking projects months in advance at rates significantly higher than I had charged when I first started. About 6 months after the divorce finalized, my business was thriving. I was earning more money than I had at my previous job. I was doing work I loved, and I was building something that was entirely mine. The success felt particularly sweet after everything Derek had put me through. I thought Derek was completely out of my life. We had no reason to communicate, no shared assets or responsibilities, and I assumed we would both move forward separately, just as he had said he wanted. But about 4 months ago, Derek suddenly reappeared in my life. He sent me a text message asking if we could meet for coffee to catch up and make peace. I was immediately suspicious. Derek had shown no interest in maintaining any kind of friendship during or after the divorce. Why would he suddenly want to reconnect? But I was also curious, and part of me thought that maybe Derek had matured, had gained perspective on his behavior, and wanted to genuinely make amends. We met at a coffee shop in downtown Oakland. Derek looked good, more put together than he had been during the final months of our marriage. He was friendly, warm, and seemingly genuine in his interest in how I was doing. "I've been following your business on Instagram," Derek said during our conversation. "You're doing amazing work. I'm really impressed with what you've built." "Thank you," I replied cautiously. "I know things ended badly between us," Derek continued. "I handled the divorce poorly, and I didn't take responsibility for how my business failure affected you. I've had a lot of time to think about my behavior, and I want to apologize. You deserved better than how I treated you." The apology seemed sincere, and I appreciated hearing it, even though it didn't undo the damage he had caused. I appreciate you saying that," I told him. "It wasn't an easy time." "I'm trying to get back on my feet professionally," Derek shared. "I've been consulting for a few companies, nothing too serious yet, but I'm thinking about starting another business, learning from my past mistakes, doing it right this time." We talked for about an hour, and it felt almost like old times, like the version of Derek I had fallen in love with, rather than the bitter, resentful person he had become. Over the following weeks, Derek reached out a few more times. He would text to ask how I was doing, comment supportively on my Instagram posts, and occasionally suggest meeting for coffee or dinner. I was cautiously receptive to rebuilding some kind of cordial relationship. We had been married for 6 years, and part of me wanted to believe that we could move forward without resentment or conflict. But then something happened that made me realize Derek's renewed interest in my life wasn't about making peace. It was about using me. About 3 months ago, I received a message from a woman named Jessica Tran, who introduced herself as a mutual acquaintance of Derek's and mine. Jessica said she had heard that Derek and I were working on reconciliation and wanted to congratulate us. I was immediately confused. "I'm not sure where you got that information," I replied. "Derek and I are divorced. We're not getting back together." Jessica seemed surprised. "That's not what Derek has been telling people. He's been saying you're rebuilding your relationship, that you've been spending a lot of time together, and that you're supporting his new business venture." I felt my stomach drop. "He's been saying that?" "Yes," Jessica confirmed. "He mentioned it at a networking event last week. He was talking about his new business and how having you back in his life has given him stability, and how your success in your design business shows he has good judgment about partnerships." I was stunned. Derek had been meeting me for coffee a few times and had taken that as license to tell people we were getting back together, and he was using my business success as evidence of his own credibility. "That's not true," I told Jessica firmly. "We've had a few friendly conversations, but we're definitely not getting back together, and I'm absolutely not involved in any business venture of his." After that conversation, I started paying closer attention to what Derek was saying and doing. I looked at his social media more carefully and noticed that he had been posting photos that suggested we were spending time together, photos from restaurants we had been to during our coffee meetings, carefully cropped to make it look like we were on dates. He was also sharing articles about successful entrepreneurs and making comments about building something new with the support of people who matter. It was vague enough to be deniable, but clearly meant to create an impression that he was in a stable relationship and had his personal life together. I was furious. Derek was using me and my success to rehabilitate his reputation and make himself look stable and credible to potential investors or business partners. He was taking advantage of my willingness to meet with him cordially and turning it into a false narrative about our relationship. I confronted him via text. "I've been hearing that you're telling people we're getting back together. That's not true, and you need to stop saying that." Derek's response was dismissive. "I haven't said we're getting back together. I've mentioned that we're rebuilding a friendship and that I respect what you've built with your business. If people are making assumptions, that's not something I can control." "You're intentionally creating a misleading impression," I replied. "Stop using me and my business to make yourself look good." "I'm not using you," Derek insisted. "But I can't help that my association with someone successful reflects well on me. We were married for 6 years. People know we were together. If they see that we're still friendly, that's just reality." I realized that confronting Derek directly wasn't going to stop him. He would just deny it or rationalize his behavior. I needed to figure out what he was actually doing and why. That's when I reached out to a private investigator named Marcus Cole, who specialized in business fraud and misrepresentation. I explained the situation. My ex-husband was using me and my business to create a false impression with potential investors. "I need to know what Derek is actually telling people," I told Marcus, "what he's claiming about our relationship, what he's saying about my involvement in his business ventures, and how he's using my success to build credibility he doesn't deserve." Marcus agreed to investigate, and over the next few weeks he uncovered exactly what Derek was doing. It was far worse than I had imagined. Derek had been actively pitching a new tech consulting business to potential investors, and he was using my interior design success as a central part of his credibility story. According to Marcus's investigation, Derek had created a pitch deck that included photos of my design projects, photos he had taken from my Instagram and website without my permission. In his presentations, Derek was describing these projects as examples of family business success and collaborative ventures that demonstrated his ability to support and build successful enterprises. He was literally showing investors my work and taking credit for being part of it. But it got worse. Derek was also telling investors that we were reconciling and that I was going to be involved in his new venture as a design consultant who would help him create appealing office spaces for his clients. He was using the narrative of our reconciliation to make himself seem stable, mature, and someone who had learned from past mistakes. Marcus obtained recordings of Derek's pitch meetings where he specifically referenced me by name, showed photos of my design work, and talked about how having Rachel's support and expertise gave him confidence in his ability to succeed this time. He had also created social media posts that carefully cropped me into the background or used old photos from our marriage to suggest we were currently together. He was essentially creating a fictional version of our relationship and using it to secure investment money. I was beyond furious. This wasn't just misleading, it was fraud. Derek was using my name, my work, and a completely fabricated story about our relationship to convince people to invest money in his business. Marcus's investigation also revealed something crucial. One of the investors Derek was pitching to was a woman named Catherine Hayes, who happened to be a new client of mine. Catherine had hired me 3 weeks earlier to redesign her home office, and during our initial consultation, she had mentioned she was an angel investor who funded early-stage tech companies. When Catherine saw my work and heard Derek's pitch, she recognized my design style immediately. She didn't know Derek and I had been married, but she knew something wasn't right about how he was presenting my work as connected to his business. Catherine reached out to me directly. "I need to show you something," she said during a phone call. I recently attended a pitch meeting for a tech consulting startup, and the founder was showing interior design photos that I'm almost certain are your work. He was claiming these were projects connected to his business ventures. She sent me screenshots from Derek's pitch deck, and I immediately confirmed they were my project's photos taken directly from my portfolio without permission or attribution. "That founder is my ex-husband," I told Catherine. "We've been divorced for 8 months. I have nothing to do with his business, and he's using my work fraudulently to build credibility with investors." Catherine was silent for a moment. "He's been telling investors that you're in a relationship and that you're going to be involved in his new company." "That's completely false," I said firmly. "We're not in a relationship. I'm not involved in his business, and he's using my work and fabricating stories about our connection without my knowledge or consent." Catherine's tone shifted to anger. "That's securities fraud. He's materially misrepresenting his business relationships and capabilities to potential investors. This is exactly the kind of fraudulent behavior that destroys trust in the investment community." "What can I do about it?" I asked. "Well," Catherine said slowly, "he's scheduled to do a final pitch presentation to a group of potential investors next week. I'm one of the investors who will be in that meeting. If you wanted to attend and set the record straight, I could make sure you have access to the meeting." I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was my opportunity to expose Derek's lies directly to the people he was trying to deceive. "I want to be there," I said immediately. "And I want to bring evidence that proves he's been lying about our relationship and using my work fraudulently." Over the next week, I prepared obsessively. I gathered screenshots of Derek's social media posts where he had implied we were together. I collected emails and text messages showing the limited, cordial nature of our actual communication. I documented every instance where he had used my design photos without permission. I prepared a timeline showing when our divorce was finalized and proving that his claims about our reconciliation were fabricated. Marcus helped me organize everything into a clear, professional presentation. "You want to be factual, calm, and devastating," he advised. "Let the evidence speak for itself. Don't get emotional or make it personal. Just show these investors exactly how Derek has been lying to them." Catherine coordinated with me about the logistics. The investor meeting was scheduled at a conference room in downtown San Francisco. Derek would present first, and then there would be a Q&A session. Catherine suggested I arrive early and sit in the back of the room so Derek wouldn't notice me until it was too late for him to change his story. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. I kept rehearsing what I would say, reviewing my evidence, and imagining Derek's face when he realized I was there. The morning of the meeting, I dressed professionally in a navy blue suit and arrived at the conference building 30 minutes early. Catherine met me in the lobby and escorted me to the conference room. "The other investors don't know you're coming," Catherine explained. "I thought it would be more effective if Derek's deception was exposed in real time rather than giving everyone advance warning." We entered the conference room, which was set up with a large table surrounded by chairs and a screen at the front for presentations. About 12 people were already there, mostly in their 40s and 50s, dressed in business attire and reviewing materials on their laptops. I took a seat in the back corner of the room, positioning myself where I could see Derek, but where I wouldn't be immediately visible when he walked in. About 10 minutes later, Derek entered the conference room. He looked confident and polished, wearing an expensive suit and carrying a leather portfolio. He greeted several of the investors warmly, shaking hands and making small talk. He didn't see me. His attention was focused on the investors he was trying to impress, particularly the ones seated near the front of the room. Catherine called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming. Today we're going to hear from Derek Shaw about his new tech consulting venture. Derek, the floor is yours." Derek moved to the front of the room and connected his laptop to the presentation screen. His pitch deck appeared, and I immediately recognized several photos from my portfolio on the opening slides. Derek began his presentation with confidence. "Thank you for this opportunity. What I'm building is a tech consulting firm that combines strategic business advising with an understanding of how physical workspace design impacts company culture and productivity." He clicked to the next slide, which showed a photo of a modern office I had designed for a startup client 2 years ago. This is an example of the kind of integrated thinking I bring to client relationships, Derek continued. Understanding that business success isn't just about strategy, it's about creating environments where teams can thrive. I felt my jaw clench. He was literally showing my work and describing it as if he had been involved in creating it. Derek continued through his pitch, talking about his experience supporting successful design ventures and his collaborative approach to business building. He mentioned that he had strong partnerships with successful entrepreneurs in the Bay Area design community, and that these relationships gave him unique insights into how companies could optimize their operations. Then he got to the slide I had been waiting for. It showed a photo of me from our marriage, cropped to make it look recent, alongside photos of my recent design projects. I'm fortunate to have rebuilt a strong relationship with my ex-wife, Rachel Montgomery, who runs a highly successful interior design business, Derek said smoothly. Rachel's expertise in creating functional, beautiful spaces aligns perfectly with the holistic approach I'm taking with this consulting firm. She's agreed to serve as a design consultant for my clients, providing them with workspace optimization that complements the strategic business advising I provide. Multiple investors nodded approvingly. One man in the front row made a note on his laptop. Derek continued, "Having Rachel's support and involvement in this venture demonstrates the kind of collaborative, relationship-focused approach I bring to everything I do. It shows that I've learned from past mistakes and that I build sustainable partnerships based on mutual success." I felt my heart pounding. Every word was a lie. I had never agreed to be involved in his business. We weren't rebuilding a romantic relationship. He was using my name and reputation to create a completely fictional narrative. Derek wrapped up his presentation and opened the floor for questions. Several investors asked about his business model, his target clients, and his revenue projections. Derek answered smoothly, occasionally referencing collaborative partnerships and strong relationships in the design community. Finally, Catherine spoke up. "Derek, you've mentioned several times that Rachel Montgomery is going to be involved in this venture as a design consultant. Can you tell us more about the scope of her involvement?" "Absolutely," Derek said confidently. "Rachel and I have been rebuilding our relationship over the past several months. She's been incredibly supportive of this new venture, and we've discussed how her design expertise can add value for my consulting clients. She'll be available to provide workspace design consultations, which differentiates my offering from traditional business consulting." Catherine nodded slowly. "That's interesting. And Rachel has agreed to this arrangement?" "Yes," Derek said without hesitation. "We've had extensive conversations about it. She's excited about the opportunity to expand her business into the commercial consulting space." "That's fascinating," Catherine said, her tone carefully neutral. "Because Rachel is actually here today, and I think she might have a different perspective on this arrangement." The color drained from Derek's face. His eyes darted around the room, searching for me. When he spotted me in the back corner, he looked like he had seen a ghost. I stood up calmly and walked to the front of the room. Every investor's eyes were on me, their expressions ranging from confused to intrigued. "Hello, Derek," I said evenly. "I appreciate the opportunity to clarify some things about your presentation." Derek looked panicked. "Rachel? What are you doing here?" "Catherine invited me," I said simply. "She recognized my design work in your pitch deck and wanted to verify the claims you've been making about our relationship and my involvement in your business." I turned to address the room of investors. "My name is Rachel Montgomery. Derek and I were married for 6 years. We've been divorced for 8 months. Everything Derek just told you about our current relationship and my involvement in his business venture is false." I connected my laptop to the presentation screen and pulled up the evidence I had prepared. "First, let me show you the timeline of our relationship." I began, displaying a simple graphic. "Derek and I finalized our divorce on March 15th of this year. Since then, we have met in person exactly 4 times, all at coffee shops for brief conversations. We are not rebuilding our relationship, romantically or professionally. I clicked to the next slide, which showed screenshots of Derek's social media posts, where he had implied we were together. Derek has been creating a false narrative on social media, using carefully cropped photos and vague language to suggest we're in a current relationship. These posts coincided with his efforts to secure investment for his new business. Several investors leaned forward, studying the screen with obvious concern. Second, let me address the claim that I've agreed to serve as a design consultant for Derek's business. I pulled up our text message history. Here's the complete record of our communication over the past 4 months. As you can see, we discussed meeting for coffee to make peace after our difficult divorce. At no point did Derek ever ask me to be involved in his business, and at no point did I agree to any such arrangement. I showed the text where I had confronted Derek about telling people we were getting back together, and his dismissive response. Third, and most importantly, Derek has been using photos of my interior design work in his pitch materials without my permission or knowledge. I displayed several side-by-side comparisons showing photos from my portfolio next to slides from Derek's pitch deck. These are my projects completed for my clients, documented on my business website and social media. Derek has taken these photos and presented them in his investor materials as examples of his collaborative ventures and integrated approach to business. He has materially misrepresented his connection to my work and my business. The room was completely silent. Several investors were taking notes. One woman near the front looked openly angry. I clicked to my final slide, which showed the timeline of Derek's business failure during our marriage and the financial impact it had on both of us. For context, Derek's previous business failed spectacularly 3 years ago. During that failure, he depleted $75,000 of our joint savings without my knowledge or consent, attempting to keep his failing company afloat. His financial mismanagement contributed significantly to the end of our marriage. The idea that I would now choose to attach my successful business to Derek's new venture, after watching him destroy his last company and damage our financial stability, is absurd. I turned to look directly at Derek, who was standing frozen near the screen, his face pale. Derek, you had no right to use my work, my name, or my reputation to build credibility with investors. You fabricated a story about our relationship to make yourself seem stable and reliable. You claimed I had agreed to be involved in your business when we never had. Any such conversation, you committed fraud. I turned back to the investors. I'm here today to make absolutely clear that I have no involvement in Derek's business venture. I have not agreed to serve as a consultant. I am not in a romantic relationship with Derek. Any claims he has made to the contrary are false. If any of you choose to invest in his company, you should do so with full knowledge that the collaborative partnerships and a relationship-focused approach he described are fabrications. I unplugged my laptop and gathered my materials. Catherine, thank you for giving me the opportunity to set the record straight. To everyone else, I apologize for disrupting your meeting, but I felt it was important that you know the truth about what Derek has been claiming. The room erupted into questions. Multiple investors started talking at once, directing their questions and obvious anger at Derek. Is this true? One man demanded. Have you been lying about your relationship with Ms. Montgomery? Derek stammered, trying to formulate a response. It's not that simple. Rachel and I have been... It is that simple, Catherine interrupted sharply. You told us explicitly that Ms. Montgomery had agreed to be involved in your business as a design consultant. She has just proved that you fabricated that claim. You used her work in your pitch materials without permission. You created a false narrative about your current relationship. That's securities fraud, Derek. You've materially misrepresented your business capabilities and relationships to induce investment. Another investor stood up. I've heard enough. Derek, I'm out. I won't invest $1 in a venture built on lies. 3 more investors echoed the sentiment, gathering their things and preparing to leave. Derek looked desperate. Wait, please. Let me explain. I believed that Rachel and I were moving toward a reconciliation. I may have been premature in how I described our arrangement, but my intentions were— Your intentions were to deceive us, Catherine said coldly. And you succeeded until Ms. Montgomery exposed your lies. This meeting is over. The investors filed out of the conference room, several of them stopping to shake my hand or thank me for my honesty. Derek stood at the front of the room, his pitch deck still displayed on the screen behind him, looking like his world had collapsed. When the room had mostly cleared, Derek approached me. His confident demeanor had completely evaporated. Rachel, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for things to go this way. You didn't mean to get caught, I corrected. You absolutely meant to lie to those investors, use my work without permission, and fabricate stories about our relationship. You just didn't expect me to find out and show up to expose you. I was desperate, Derek said weakly. After the last business failed, no one wanted to invest in me. I needed something that would make me look stable and credible. Your success hour. History. It seemed like it could help me get a second chance. So you used me, I said flatly. Again, just like you used our joint savings to prop up your failing business without telling me. Just like you've taken advantage of every resource available to you without consideration for anyone else. What are you going to do? Derek asked quietly. I've already done it, I replied. I've exposed your lies to the people you were trying to deceive. I've documented everything in case any of those investors want to pursue legal action against you for fraud. And I'm going to make sure that everyone in our professional community knows exactly what you did, so you can't try this scheme with anyone else. Derek's shoulders slumped. You've destroyed any chance I had of rebuilding my career. No, Derek, you destroyed your own chances by choosing fraud over honest work, by using people instead of building genuine partnerships, by lying instead of earning credibility through actual achievement. I picked up my bag and headed toward the door. As I reached it, I turned back. For what it's worth, Derek, I actually wanted to believe you had changed when you reached out to me 4 months ago. I wanted to think you had matured and learned from your mistakes, but you proved that you're still the same person who depleted our savings without telling me, who blamed everyone else for your failures, and who thinks you're entitled to use other people's success to cover for your own inadequacies. I'm glad I found out what you were doing before you could damage my reputation or deceive those investors any further. I walked out of the conference room and didn't look back. The aftermath of exposing Derek's fraud was more extensive than I had anticipated. Within days, word had spread throughout the Bay Area business and investment community about what had happened. Catherine Hayes, it turned out, was well connected and respected in the investment world, and she made sure that other investors knew about Derek's fraudulent behavior. Several business publications picked up the story, not naming me specifically at my request, but detailing how an entrepreneur had been caught using his ex-wife's successful business and fabricating a relationship to build false credibility with investors. The articles discussed it as a cautionary tale about due diligence and the importance of verifying claims made in pitch meetings. Derek's reputation was completely destroyed. Any chance he had of securing investment for his consulting business evaporated. The few professional connections he had maintained after his first business failure distanced themselves from him once they learned about the fraud. I also received an unexpected call from Derek's brother, Michael, whom I had always gotten along with during my marriage. Michael apologized for his brother's behavior and told me that the family was disappointed but not surprised by what Derek had done. Derek's always had this pattern, Michael said sadly. He builds something up with big promises. It falls apart, and then he blames circumstances or other people. He never takes real responsibility. What he did to you both during your marriage, and now with this investor fraud, that's who he is. I'm sorry you had to deal with it twice. For my part, the exposure of Derek's scheme actually benefited my business. The story of how I had confronted him in the investor meeting became known in design and business circles, and I gained a reputation not just for my design work, but for my integrity and willingness to stand up against fraud. New clients reached out specifically because they had heard about how I had handled the situation. Catherine Hayes became both a client and a mentor, introducing me to other high-profile individuals who needed design services. My Instagram following grew significantly as people became interested in both my work and my story. I was careful about how much personal detail I shared, but I did post a carefully worded statement about the importance of protecting your work, your reputation, and your boundaries, a message that resonated with many of my followers. About a month after the investor meeting, I received a final text message from Derek. It was long and rambling, alternating between apologies and justifications for his behavior. He claimed he had been under tremendous pressure and had made mistakes in judgment, but that he didn't deserve to have his entire career destroyed over one misunderstanding. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Derek had made his choices, and he would have to live with the consequences. Instead, I focused on continuing to build Montgomery Design into the successful, ethical business I had envisioned when I started it. I took on exciting projects, mentored young designers, and built a reputation based on actual achievement rather than false narratives or borrowed credibility. 6 months after the investor meeting, I attended a design industry award ceremony where Montgomery Design was being recognized for excellence in sustainable residential design. As I stood on stage accepting the award, I thought about how far I had come from that difficult period when Derek's business had failed and depleted our savings. I had rebuilt my finances, established a successful business, and proven that success built on honesty and hard work was far more meaningful and sustainable than anything constructed on lies and manipulation. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't just exposing Derek's fraud in that investor meeting, though that had been deeply satisfying. The best revenge was building a life and career that was entirely mine, that reflected my values, and that no one could take credit for or diminish. I never heard from Derek again after that final text message. According to mutual acquaintances, he eventually left the Bay Area and moved to another city, presumably to try to start over somewhere his reputation hadn't been, completely destroyed. I occasionally wondered if he learned anything from what happened, if he ever took real responsibility for his pattern of using people and blaming others when his schemes fell apart. But mostly, I didn't think about Derek at all. I was too busy building something real, something honest, and something that was entirely my own achievement. And that success earned through hard work, integrity, and refusing to let someone use me for their own gain was sweeter than any revenge could ever be. If you enjoyed this story of how I exposed my ex-husband's fraud and protected my business, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my situation, and check out my other stories about standing up for yourself and refusing to be used. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell the truth and let the consequences unfold.